Welcome to Out in It, where we discuss our hunting and fishing adventures, our successes, and our failures.
What's up, everybody? Thanks for jumping in. Man, we got an awesome guest today. We got Justin Cooper. He's on the MLF Pro Tour right now. How's it going, brother?
It's going great, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you said you just got off the water today. What was that like, man?
It was kind of tough today. We had it's post front, bluebird skies, and not a breath of wind out there. It
Yeah,
was like 32 degrees this morning. It warmed up, and once it started warming up, it got a little better. But for the
right.
most part, it was pretty tough.
Well, man, I'm sure you're still excited about how you know that you had the event there at Toledo a couple weeks ago, your home lake, and you got an opportunity to not only compete but compete well and place top 10. This is your first year on the pro tour, correct?
Yeah, it's my first year on Bass Pro Tour. It was uh it was awesome getting to sleep in my own bed for the first event. That's for sure. Being here at Toledo Bend, that's
Yeah,
where I grew up. So being able to start it out on my home pond, it was awesome. And
for sure.
yeah, a great event.
So, what was it like? I mean, obviously, you've probably followed it. You probably know some of the guys, and just to be able to not only to meet some of those guys and interact with them, but not only just that, but just to compete against them. I'm sure that was probably a pretty special feeling.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got to know that some of those guys throughout the pro circuit, and fishing that General Tire Team Series past couple of years, but to actually get to fish against a full field of those guys and fish against guys that I grew up watching, that I've looked up to, since I was a little kid, like Ott Defoe and Edwin Evers, guys like that. And then to now be on the same competition level as them, and now they're my competitors. Sometimes you have to try to put that aside, and like, all right, quit fangirling a little bit and go out there and try to beat them.
Right. So you go out on the lake and your first day, and what was it like just getting out there and were there nerves immediately, or did like being on your home weight give you a little bit more comfort, or what was that like?
Yeah, so you know, I put a lot of pressure on myself for that first one just because it was here at Toledo Bend. That Toledo Bend or the home field advantage can be a double-edged sword sometimes. They can go really good or it can go really bad. So I felt put a lot of pressure on myself to be on the right side of that rope, on that good side of it. And there was a lot of nerves. I hadn't been nervous for a bass tournament in a long time, but definitely day one takeoff, I was feeling it a little bit for sure.
Right. Absolutely. And understandable. Just to, like you said, you got some of the living legends out there, guys that you've grown up watching, guys that, probably when you were 15, 16 years old, you're hopping on YouTube and watching their tips and tricks videos, and now you're fishing right alongside those guys.
Yeah,
And,
exactly.
and then, so, but like you said, getting to sleep in your own bed, and then probably, I'm assuming your family was near, so that probably helped too.
Yeah, for sure. I grew up about 30 minutes or so from like Cypress Bend where we were taken out of. So I had a huge family support group. Of course, my wife's from Monroe, but we live here now, and of
Yeah.
course my immediate family, parents, grandparents, a lot of friends, and community support, neighbors, uh, a lot of people at the watch party, and even coming out there and following me on the water. There was one point I had 10 or 11 boats following me, that was full of people. There was a couple of pontoon boats that had 6 or 8 people on it, so
Right.
I had a big support group, not only watching but out there on the water, visually watching me as well. So it was pretty awesome, getting to catch fish for them. It was awesome.
Right. So watching, from my perspective, getting to watch it, you get to kind of bounce around and see what everybody's doing, and it seemed like everybody was for the most part throwing some version of a Demiki rig or some kind of swim bait on a jig head and out deep catching suspended bass. And last year it seemed like Wheeler kind of did that on Gunnersville, and I'm not sure how new that style is, but it's gaining a lot of popularity now. Is that kind of something you knew everybody was going to be doing, live scoping and throwing that rig like that?
Yeah, I figured that's since it was came to be on the schedule. I knew that that time of year it was most likely going to be one with forward facing sonar. I wasn't for sure that the Mickey rig would be as like killer as it was. I figured some guys would mix in a jerk bait a little more or some type of underspin or something like that, and that just really wasn't the case. I think Zach Burge utilized the jerk bait a little bit,
Right.
but for the most part, the Mickey rig was the deal with some type of fluke style bait on it. That there's so many different types now, but just that size profile and everything that really imitates the threadfin shad that all these fish were chasing
Right.
at Toledo Bend that this past couple of weeks. That's what we were all imitating, and the water also came up 2 foot in like the week before practice. We got like 8 to 12 inches of rain on the lake the week before, so that really threw everybody for a curveball, and I think it actually ended up making more fish suspend than what would have been if we not had that rain. I think a lot of guys we could have caught them on the bottom, cranking or dragging a Carolina rig or something like that. But I'm assuming still try to find some of that once because they turn generators on as well, and I figured down on that south end of the lake there may be some dotted up somewhere, and that's what that's my favorite way to catch them is dotted up on the bottom. But
Right.
I could just never find that, and I guess when they come up off that bottom, that water come up, a lot of them just start suspending. There was some fish that went to the bank, but it was still really cold. I think like during practice, the water temp was still upper 40s, and all the bait was out super deep as well.
Right.
We're you know in practice, most of the fish I was finding was in, or they weren't sitting in, but my boat was sitting in anywhere between 40 and 60 foot of water. There's the fish would be anywhere from 5 to 20 feet down below the surface, but that's where the bait was. The bait was in 30, 35 foot of water, and once the tournament started, on day one, I started the event. My boat was sitting in about that 40, 45 foot range. By the knockout round, my boat was sitting in
Oh,
10 to 15 foot of water.
keep on going, brother.
And that's just goes to show like how much those fish were moving. It was because it was a warming trend that week, and you just had to stay up with the bait. That was the most important thing. These bass were moving so much every day,
Right.
and that's the one thing I would say that's kind of tough about the Bass Pro Tour format is having that off day. So I was Group A, so I fished on Tuesday, Thursday, and so Tuesday, Thursday knockout round was Saturday, championship was Sunday. So I had basically 2 off days. I fished Tuesday. Group B was Wednesday, so I didn't fish then. I fished Thursday. Then Group B went again on Friday, and to be able to have to go back out and go back to those same areas, hoping that they were going to be there, but realizing pretty quick that they weren't there like they were, or they weren't biting. So then the hunt was on, and just stayed on that Garmin Force trolling motor, constantly looking. They wouldn't be far. Well, relatively far. There was one day between the knockout and championship round, which was only overnight. Those fish moved a quarter mile, half a mile, even. The bait pushed back out, but it was an absolute grind of an event. Like I said, having to stay up with them and constantly be around them. With that format, you can't have any lull times. You got to be around them and catching them to be able to bring
Right.
that trophy home. And once I find an area that they were in, chances are they were going to bite unless, there was another guy that went through there, which was the case on the championship round. In period 3, I pulled into an area that I haven't fished yet in the tournament, but I've seen some fish in practice, and man, they were floating everywhere, and it was so aggravating. That's the aggravating part about live scope. Just because we can see them, we can't make them bite.
Right.
And they were floating everywhere, and they would just follow it. And I was getting so aggravated. I was like, why? The fish are here to win this. Why are they not biting? And come to find out after the event, I talked to some guys, and Dustin Connell actually was fishing that area in the knockout round, and he started the championship round there. And that's where he caught all his fish in those respective times. He didn't end up winning it. He ended up winning another area in that period 3. But I just pulled in there, thinking those were fresh fish, and they weren't.
Right.
Dustin done come through there and sore left them all, and that's why they were following my bait, because they already got caught. And that's the other part about that format. You never know if a guy's has went through there, and caught them. But still, great event. Finished up 8th, and pretty. I would love to kept that trophy here at home, no doubt. But a top 10 against that group of guys and that caliber of guys is tough to do, even at your own pond.
Right, and what's it? 80 pros that started out the day there on day 1, or between groups A and B, and then you whittle it all
there's
the way
80,
down to
80 of us.
So I mean, man, that's pretty sweet to be able to grind through all that to get down to the top 10, especially in your first pro event against
man.
you said, guys like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. To be able to, fish my first championship round on Bass Pro Tour with, and fishing against Connell and Wheeler, it's pretty special for sure. Next, we head to Santee Cooper next, so I'll get them there.
So do you, that's next month, isn't it?
That's next week. I leave Thursday.
Okay.
Yeah, practice starts on Saturday. First day of the tournament is Tuesday. So next Tuesday, a week from today.
You see a lot of these guys on TikTok or social media talking about how they don't want to watch guys just sit out on catch suspended bass on. I'm sure you hear all this.
Oh yeah, for sure.
On live scope or forward facing sonar, and man, it's not like that's a full time of the year thing. What's your opinion on that? I mean, bass fishing obviously is changing for the worse or for the better. It's changing, and we're transitioning into a part of the year, especially when you get into pre spawn and when you get into the spawn when the fish are up on their beds, where it's not going to be as important as it was probably for the fish that were suspended.
Yeah, for sure. So. Yeah, there's a lot of love-hate with sorry, dog barking.
You're good,
UPS. She hates the UPS man. Cinch. There ain't no telling. She may bark a few more times. But anyways,
that's all right, brother.
Yeah. So live scope, it's like a love-hate relationship. You either love it or you hate it, and I can understand guys not loving to watch it on live, because from watching our backs all day and us look at a screen all day, it doesn't seem that fun. But if they do it, there's a difference between watching and like actually doing it. I love to scope. I love to catch them that way. It's not my favorite way to catch them, but I love to do it. It's somebody on live actually said it best, or made a really good comparison. Live scoping is more like hunting than it is fishing, because you are constantly on trolling motor looking for one, and once you see one, then it's the next and biggest part is to make the right cast. Because if it's taking multiple casts to get your bait on that fish, man, it can really be tough to get it to bite if it takes multiple casts. And your best case scenario is you make the very perfect cast the very first time, and in the wind, when the wind's blowing and the boat's rocking and the fish is moving to the left or the right, man, that's difficult. It is really a very difficult thing to be able to do successfully. So, like I said, I get it that it may be boring to watch, but it's an absolute blast to do. And sorry,
Oh, you're good,
hey,
man.
hey, mate. Let's see. Does he need? And so that it's definitely changed the game. Live scope has definitely changed the game. Um, it seems like more and more tournaments are one using forward facing sonar or checks or cash using forward facing sonar, and I think it's just because we're targeting fish that have never been targeted before. You know, these fish are for the most part fresh, or it's easier to dial a lake in using forward facing sonar because we can stay up with them. We can kind of pick apart where they're located, a lot easier than it is, without it. Whether they're out in 40 foot of water on in the mouth of a drain or middle of the drain or even shallow parts of the drain. Well, I say drains because I'm from Louisiana, Texas. Here Toledo, Rayburn, we call a drain like a ditch, or
Right.
where a creek runs in, and
Yeah.
to be able to, it's much easier to dissect an area using forward facing sonar. And I think that's another way that, it's starting to dominate is because it's easier and it's quicker to break a lake down and find the fish. So, but it doesn't make it doesn't make them bite. That's the other
Right.
thing, just because we can see them, it does not make them bite. And I think that, it's a misconception by a lot of guys. Oh, well, you have forward facing sonar, you're catching all the fish out there. No, man, that's not the case. I bet
Right.
I threw it. I bet today I probably threw it 200 of them and got a half a dozen to bite. So it's a love hate relationship. Sometimes you love it, sometimes it can aggravate and make you want to pull your hair out.
Yeah, well, and just even watching it as a fan, you can see that if just seeing what y'all are doing, if you're sitting there, working that bait, that means it's in front of a bass.
For
So,
sure.
right, so and then you can see it, and one of the differences that I think that I saw even just spectating is that some guys they'd make a couple of casts at a bass. If that bass didn't act interested, they knew they were moving on. They gave up
Yeah,
on it.
for sure. Yeah, so there's a time, and once you spend more time doing it, how that bat's going to react. And so that's one thing, and some advice for some guys. When you see a dot out there and you cast to it, if you make 5, 6, 7 casts, and you feel like, man, I'm bringing my bait within a foot of that fish. I know he's got to see it. If that fish doesn't react, it's probably not a bass. You know, he must be dropping off a bunch of packages here. He's still here. uh,
No worries, man. No worries
yeah.
at all.
Sorry about all that.
Oh, you're good. My phone done fell down twice.
Yeah, but yeah. Where was I going with that? She done lost my train of thought. But
Oh, we were talking about it. Live scoping and if you're putting your bait right in front of the bass and it's and a fish and it's
yeah.
not
Okay.
biting, it's probably not a
Yeah,
bass.
it's probably not a bass. A bass or a predator, a fish that eats shad. That's a predator. He's going to react to your bait, whether it
Right.
be a bass or crappie or even a catfish. But if you see that fish turn, or I even say like they flinch because you can see when you're dialed in on him, and you can see that return kind of almost like a reflected, it like makes a reflection or something like that. I call it flinching. That bass flinches on that bait. He either feels it through his lateral line or he feels something. And when you see him turn and come to it, it's going to be 100% a fish that eats shad. Not a guarantee it's going to be a bass because there's a lot of crappie and catfish that are floating around out there that look like a bass. But if he reacts to it, it's 100% something that eats shad. So that's some really good advice to have for guys that are struggling. Maybe throwing at dots that aren't reacting. Like I said, if it reacts, it's most likely a bass.
Right. So you kind of mentioned breaking down a lake there, and that was one of the things I did want to talk to you about. So we're kind of, especially in the southern part of the country, probably around most of the lakes y'all are going to fish down in Texas and Louisiana right now. You're starting to break into that pre-spawn pattern a little bit right now with the
For sure.
warmer temperatures we've been having. And so as you're getting into that pre-spawn, like what are some things that you do when you're breaking down a lake that you've never been on, even if it, starting out, whether it be with using maps and nautical maps like topography maps, and what you're doing with your boat in your first practice round. What are some of the things that you're kind of doing? And I know that can vary, obviously, whether it's a Highland Reservoir or something down where you're fishing.
Yeah, it can for sure. But, for the most part, it all starts with map study. Pre-spawn, I'm looking for drains that lead into spawning areas or spawning coves. There's some really good research online. A lot of times, if you dig deep enough, man, you can find uh, areas of the lake that produce for prior tournaments. Like take Toledo Bend for example. There's a lot of tournaments that are won out of Housing Creek or 6 Mile or something like that. And if I was never been to Toledo before and I find that information, I'm like, okay, so those are productive areas, obviously, that kick out tournament winning stringers regularly. So I'm gonna look on my map and I'm gonna go to those creeks, to those giant they're giant coves here on Toledo that are like the size of some people's lakes. But
Right.
but then I'm going to see where the main creek is, and I'm going to follow that creek. And every time there's a drain or another branch or a depression that comes off of that creek and leads into a spawning flat or a cove, that's the areas where I'm gonna start because that's probably where your females are going to be positioned if it's still a little early. But that's where I'm gonna start. I'm gonna put my boat in one of them drains. I'm gonna drop that Garmin trolling motor, and I'm gonna start looking at live scope and seeing what's swimming around there. And once I'm gonna go through that drain, if I'm seeing some, okay, I'm gonna keep going. I may fish for them, see what happens, but I'm gonna mentally start marking in my head. Okay, I'm starting to see fish once my boat gets in 20 foot of water in this drain. But and then I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna go all the way up until I'm at the back of this drain or back of this cove, and I may get to the back of that cove and want to fish shallow or something like that. But I'm gonna figure out where I'm seeing the most fish or where I'm going to get the most bites, and I may run a half a dozen of those or so and do the same exact thing. Start at the mouth of it and go all the way to the back. And then I feel like if you run enough of those, it takes 5 or 6. Wherever you get the most bites, say it was 10 foot in that drain. Say I started seeing them floating around in 10 foot and I'm catching them on a jerk bait. I wasn't seeing much out there deeper than 20 foot and I didn't catch anything shallower. I'm gonna start running 10-foot drains, and see what I can find. Now, the main thing that you have to look forward to is some guys can get caught up in practice, fishing the conditions for practice. And that's something else that, other advice that I have is don't practice the conditions that are during practice. Practice for conditions for the tournament, if that makes sense. You know, say there's a warming trend, say it's kind of cold in practice and it's a warming trend, chances are those fish may push a little shallower. If I'm finding them in that 10-foot range, if I go back in the tournament, I'm gonna try to dial them in. If I'm not getting bit in that 10-foot range, but it's been a warming trend, just that mental note that I put in my head, it can help me make that move quicker, shallower, or make that shallower move quicker. So that's something to keep in mind. And then also wind direction. Wind direction plays a big part in the way bait moves. It's not just the water warming up or cooling off. Wind plays a huge factor, and that's another reason on Toledo that these fish were moving because the bait was moving so much with the wind. Like during the practice, we had a north wind. During most of the tournament, we had a south wind. Then championship day, it changed back to a north. But once you start looking at if you have a north wind, I like to look at coves that are facing south, where the wind's pushing into. And when I like Santee, we got Santee coming up next week. Well, I'm already looking at what the wind's doing now. I want to know what the wind's doing now. So when I get there, I know what coves has had the wind pushing in them for a couple days, because that's probably where the bait's going to be. And then, but I'm gonna look at the wind projected for the tournament to see if that's possibly going to change. And then I'm going to start mentally marking coves that may have the wind pushing in them once the tournament comes, just to try to get a head start or head jump on those if they do move. With the wind shift, if the bait moves, I can already kind of pinpoint, already have some spots in my mind where I can go and run to and start looking.
All right, technical difficulties, man. We're right back at it. So,
Yeah.
getting back to breaking down a lake there. I did have a question. I don't remember right exactly where we left off, but I know, like, obviously you were talking about the wind blown banks, which that's something that I've never even thought about, because if you've had wind blowing a specific way for a certain day, and then it's blowing the other way, it's not like those bait are just that they're just going to jump all the way across the lake just like
Yeah,
that.
they're not. Yeah, they're
So,
not. They'll be there for, another day or so. You never really know, like, the for sure time frame, but for sure they're not gonna, like yesterday here at Toledo, we had a really hard north wind, like really, really hard. So today, when I was looking around, I was looking in coves that would have that north wind blowing in there. Even though today was slick calm, but everywhere I went, I predicted exactly where the bait was going to be. The bass aren't always going to be around the bait for sure, but just because there's so much bait, especially in Toledo Bend, but most lakes there's so many shad that, I mean, there's not going to be bass around every shad in the lake,
right,
So like I said, I predicted just about everywhere that there was going to be bait based on my predictions from based on the wind from yesterday. Uh, and it took a few different coves. We finally got around some fish. They weren't really biting. They were super deep, but yeah, just utilize, wind prior when you get there, and utilize the wind for the future. Is it's definitely big in how bait moves around and those fish move around with the bait. And that's all pre-spawn related. Once they get
right,
up on the bank, that's not as important. Just because chasing bait isn't as important in the spawn. You're targeting, fish that are on their beds or are getting ready to spawn. More brim feeders, crawfish eaters, that type of fish. So
right.
yeah,
So for me, I live in northern Arkansas. We're fishing mostly Highland reservoirs here. So, um, you know, kind of pre-spawn, um, you're thinking points that lead back into creeks. Um, I'm more asking, and I'm sure you'll give me a pretty good response. But I got, points that lead back into creeks, probably uh, it just any kind of inconsistency, structure, cover. I mean, you're looking for, maybe they might be set up on brush piles one day. They might be,
yeah.
set up on a transition on the bank from sand to bluff or chunk rock, or
Hmm.
even just pebbles set up. Kind of what's your experience with that?
Yeah. So, taking if you take forward facing sonar out of the equation, we have a tendency now that forward facing sonar, like, kind of dominates pre spawn, because we
Right,
can we can see those fish and kind of, uh, predict how they're going to move, see where they're at. And these are more fish that are in drains or in the creeks that are just kind of floating around. But trying to take that out of her if I didn't want to fish like that. And you definitely can. You don't have to have forward facing sonar. We had it for years and years and years before, and done pretty
right,
well in the pre spawn. And that's, stuff like you were just talking about is what we targeted. In the pre spawn, I'm gonna start on main lake points. The brush piles are great. I mean, we catch them out of brush piles right now in Toledo Bend. Every fish here isn't swimming around, just in the middle of nowhere chasing bait. You still have fish on brush piles, have fish on creek swings where there may be some big stumps, big stumps or chunk rock, like you said. Um, Anywhere there's a transition from that chunk rock to a clay bank or something like that, that's good ambush points for fish. And that's what it all boils down to. Is where they can ambush bait from. It doesn't matter if it's pre-spawn, in the spawn, post-spawn, whatever time of year, you got to be where their hunting grounds are and where they're going to be set up to hunt. You know,
Right.
that's what we're doing. That's what we're trying to find, where they're going to hunt from. So those are perfect areas, like you said, to kind of check out any type of structure, um, whether it be grass. Like grass is phenomenal, uh, especially here. Y'all have much grass up there in North Arkansas?
We don't. No, sir.
Yeah, I got you. But that's big, especially here, Toledo Bend, Rayburn, Florida fisheries, of course, that hydrilla, that kind of deal. Those are phenomenal places to catch pre-spawners. Um, but yeah, I need to get up to North Arkansas a little more. I haven't been up there in a while.
Yeah, man. I'm just really exploring the lakes myself. I got a creek down by the house, and that's where I really found my love for bass fishing. And I'm in a little club up here, and we do, it's about 140 members. So I mean, it's a
It's a
pretty
good
big
size.
club.
Yeah, that's a
Yeah.
good size club for sure.
And
Yeah,
we fish out of Norfolk, Bull Shoals, and Greers Ferry Lakes up
okay.
here. And but yeah, man, that's those are some of the things, and that's kind of a lot of what my listeners are. Just some of these local guys now, and hopefully before long I'll reach
Heck
more.
yeah,
But
man.
but the thing that's one of the questions one of my buddies had. Was like, how do you break down a lake? And then for guys like the weekend angler who works all week, and he's going to go out and fish in a club, and he's going to have to go out there, and basically you've got 8 hours to figure it out and catch your bag. What's especially on a Highland reservoir, just to give some advice for some of these guys. What are you gonna do pre-spawn on a Highland reservoir, and you got 8 hours? It sounded. I mean, you probably already basically answered that, but
Well, I'm gonna look at. Of course, I'm gonna use my forward facing sonar, but I'm gonna use that around structure, like some type of like secondary points. I would say pre-spawn. Points are always a good place because they're a great place for ambush points. Start on those main lake points that lead into spawning areas, and then if you're not seeing much there, move to those secondary points. And anywhere I would still almost consider them a drain. I feel like I haven't got to fish up there much, but like a drain anywhere that like some runoff is going to run off into the lake and create like a depression, and where it's kind of flatter on both sides. Those are phenomenal places to be in the
Mhm.
pre-spawn. Even without forward facing sonar, like how we did before, you just get in those depressions in between spawning pockets or spawning flats and take a jerk bait. I mean, that jerk bait is a phenomenal tool in the pre-spawn, especially in those drains like that. Get a deep diver or something like that. You can get a little deeper if you want, or a bladed jig. We throw a bladed jig a lot in our drains, and throw it out there, let go down the bottom, and just slow crank it back. You don't have to watch forward facing sonar to be able to do that. And
Right.
we caught a lot of big bass doing that, just getting in those drains in 6, 8 foot, 10 foot of water, and slow roll a blade jig back, or a single Colorado spinnerbait.
Right.
Those are from, if the wind's really blowing, it's cloudy, like that's a great bait to do as well. Or if you need to slow down, if it's a high pressure day like today we have down here at Toledo, pick up a Carolina rig. Pick up a Carolina rig, put a lizard or a fluke style bait on the back, or a baby brush hog style bait, and just drag around in those depressions. That's where they're going to be before they pull up to spawn.
Right.
Your bait's probably still going to be in that area as well. Um, that's where your females are going to be, and of course, we want to catch the big ones. We want to catch the females, so your males are going to go first. They're going to go up to the bank first, and yeah, in during a warming trend, those males are probably going to flood the bank, but it's those females are still going to be back out a little bit. So that's still where you're going to find those females. Something in like our format. Yeah, maybe we go up on the bank and try to target more males, but in a traditional 5 fish deal, I would pull out in those drains and just get throwing a jerk bait around and slow roll a bladed jig or drag a Carolina rig in some of those depressions and just see what happens, or in and around points as well. If you
Right.
see some big chunk rock on a point that's out there by itself, man, that's a big deal there. Throw a DT6 or a DT10 across that kind of stuff, in a red color. That's an
Right.
awesome bait as well.
Yeah, man. Well, that sounds awesome. There, they for guys that are learning and guys that are really trying to understand the sport. I mean, really, bass fishing. It sounds simple, and you can make it as simple as you want to, and as complicated as you want to.
Yeah.
You know what I
Oh,
mean?
absolutely. Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. We can, and we have tendency to make it more complicated than it has to be. You
right,
know, I try to tell people all the time, don't let a fish outsmart you. Your brain's way bigger than his. I
right,
I try to keep it simple as I can, really honestly. There's I don't get super elaborate in plastic colors or different crankbaits. Like, hey, there's a handful of different plugs that I throw, a bladed jig, a certain spinner bait, certain different color or certain different soft plastics that I like to flip, and then I keep it simple with colors and in those baits as well. Like, say, a soft plastic, for example. There's four colors that you need, in my opinion, and with the exception of a few like specialty colors that I do throw. But as long as you say in a V&M baby swamp hog, which is like a baby brush hog, I can throw it on a Carolina rig, or I can flip it around bushes or boat docks or whatever. But I can take that bait in four different colors and go all across this country and catch fish. And those four colors being green pumpkin, black and blue, watermelon red, and June bug. Those four colors right there, you can take. You have to have those four colors, but you can take them all across the country and catch fish in whatever soft plastic you may like.
mhm,
Like I said, there's a few exceptions. There are a couple different colors I really like, especially on Toledo or something like that. But I try to keep it simple. I really do. There's a lot of lures out there. There's a lot of different bait colors out there that are meant to catch fishermen and not fish. Take that
right.
in consideration.
Yes,
So, like I said, I like to keep it simple and try not to overthink it too much.
for sure. Well, man, I really appreciate you hopping on with me today. It's awesome just to talk to you. Like I said, I'm coming down to Lake Fork mid March, which I'm
Yeah,
I'm
man.
assuming I'm assuming you may be down there in a tournament or whatever. But you know what? If you've got free time, I might stop by and grab a bite to eat with you or something. But
Yeah,
um,
dude. Sounds good.
we really appreciate your time, dude, and all the
Yeah,
info.
absolutely.
And hey, man, good luck at Santee Cooper next week. I'll be watching you.
Thanks, Tyler. Really appreciate you, man.
All right, Justin, you have a good one, brother.
Yeah, man. Later.